So in the last video, we established that the police are often faced with different calls, right? Because of their accessibility and the ease of contact, we expect them to handle multiple kinds of problems. Which creates this interesting conundrum, right? So we're calling them if there is trash. We're calling them if we see suspicious activity. We're calling them if like someone does not like seeing a homeless person. There's a lot of different ways and means that police are ultimately called upon and expected to behave in a certain way, right? This creates a problem, right? Because when we think about what police are intended to do, at least in the country, in the United States anyway, the police are really intended, right, to act as formal agents of social control. And with this, they are really meant for triggering the criminal justice system. And enforcing the law, right? So we can think about these aspects in it, right? And we see this, this happens in forms of training, right? Where we are asking police to learn combat techniques, different weapon usage, how to, use equipment. They have to learn how to testify in court and legal nuances associated with that. They have to learn, their legal, rights in some way, as well as other things like this. And we're also, related to Department of Homeland Security issues, right? We want them to know about, drug issues, right? And really about controlling a situation, right? And that's sort of what police are intended and trained to do, right? Now, to be sure, right, there are going to be instances on conflict resolution. There's going to be, issues about dealing with certain populations, such as like homeless people and stuff like that. But that's not necessarily uniform across the country, given how fragmented police agencies are in the United States and disparate training across decades and generations and things like that. So what ends up happening is that when we have all these different issues popping up, right, we don't have a lack of we have a lack of uniform training, right? Yet at the same time, we expect police to come when called. And from a training standpoint, right, they are equipped to control a situation via force. Now, there are certainly officers who are better at managing situations, managing people, managing, rough emotions and things like that. This is not to say all officers behave and act in a certain way, right? But a history of their training, unless there are changes, right, they're not necessarily trained on how to de-escalate techniques. So not necessarily, although that is changing in the United States and by department. So they're not necessarily de-escalating situations. They're not necessarily equipped or trained with mental health situations or people who are experiencing a crisis. They're not in a position necessarily where they are asked to mediate certain situations, because there may be some that they shouldn't be doing at all. So the bottom line is that when this ends up happening, right, we have these contacts with police that can be violent or aggressive and lead to poor outcomes. The unlawful death of certain people, a really aggressive, harsh arresting someone when maybe they should not have been arrested for their crime or behavior, right? A whole host of, issues and problems that may or may not, be the best solution in that instance, right? So what does this create then, right? Why does this matter? Why does this even, come up, right? So the issue is that because of this reliance on police, in conjunction with the training that officers receive and what their intended purpose is to use, combined with a lack of other social support systems, such as mental health counseling, such as homeless outreach, right, can lead to very negative calls for police, negative experiences. Can also lead to negative experiences and perceptions and harmful and negative relationships with the community. So this creates the situation where, there end up being, advocates and changes for changes in how police should do their job. And also leads to oftentimes, right, a reinforcement or advocacy for improving relationships in certain segments of the community. What do I mean by that, right? Or what does this actually mean? So the point of this is that you have situations, not that color because we just used that, where we have officers are deployed where they're called, and where the officer is going to do it, are deployed to places with high calls for service, and more often than not, these are areas marked by high crime, violence, poverty, tends to be more concentrated in people with ethnic minority populations. And as a result, then, when you have this, right, this repeated contact with, maybe force or just an aggressive posture or control, ends up leaving a very sour, negative taste and experience for these officers, right, or for people in this community. So what needs to change then, right? So what it really does at the events of 2020 have taught us anything, right? This led to sort of a larger advocacy for defunding police, which doesn't necessarily mean, stripping away all their money, right? But it does perhaps mean taking funding away that's used for social control, which is what the police are primarily, intended to do, and reallocating to other social services. Now, this, of course, has led to a sort of contentious debate about, is this the right thing to do? Is this something that is going to be net beneficial or net positive in certain communities? Is this something that we should continue to explore in the future, right? Now, with that said, I'm curious to see what you guys think about defunding the police in the terms of reallocating resources and taking money away from this aspect of society and reinvesting in someone else. I think that is something that is going to continue to be a hot discussion point and worthy of discussion. So I'd be curious to see what you guys come up with. Point being, though, is that when we have these calls for service, right, they really shape and interact our perception and belief system related to these people. So, it really, calls for service, while they may be boring and they're a good indication of where crime is happening, they have other implications in our society. So with that said, we'll end this series of